The heights unfold before the gaze like a world yet to reveal its purpose. Silence reigns, accompanying the stillness that stretches before any creature dares to touch it. At that moment, the mountain breathes, and the thin, cold air slips down the stone walls like an ancient whisper, a warning of its own harshness. That gentle breath reveals the true nature of the place. The mountain is devoid of trees and shade. Instead, rock, wind, and an uninterrupted abyss dominate. In this high-altitude territory, every life is a precarious balance and every move has a price. The height sustains a profound silence, and the light advances with a seemingly endless slowness. In the midst of this tense calm, a rupture occurs. A dark shadow bursts into the stillness. Its presence is heavy, powerful, marked by a slow and profound rhythm. A young, muscular bear moves forward among the granite blocks, with an impulse born more of hunger than strategy. Hunger drives him forward, and a faint trail of scent mingles with the cold wind like a distant promise he cannot ignore. He is not made for these slopes, and he knows it, but scarcity forces him to challenge terrain that does not belong to his species. He advances with the clumsiness of a hunter who has not yet seen his prey, although he senses that it is close, and each step is a gamble against the mountain itself. On the slopes where the soft earth disappears, the limbs that once stood firm now reveal hesitation. The ground doesn't give way, but neither does it offer any help. The sharp stone sinks into the pads, and the incline demands constant calculation as gravity seems determined to drag him into the void. The bear's breath turns into a visible panting in the cold air, but it still continues on its way. He doesn't realize he's being watched from above. On a narrow ledge, almost blending into the rock itself, a mountain goat stands motionless. The lightness of its shape seems designed by the mountain, and its steps find micro-crevices that the bear would never distinguish. She maintains her balance with almost impossible precision, as if the height itself recognized her as part of it. She feels no fear. She calculates every moment and observes from the summit with the serenity of an animal that knows every edge, every ledge, and every stone that could save her. The bear, guided more by instinct than reason, advances with increasing clumsiness. Loose stones roll beneath its weight, and the slope responds with hostility as fragments of rock break off and tumble into the abyss, the sound echoing like a warning. He huffs and puffs in irritation, stops for a moment, raises his head, and spots the goat. The sight of his prey unleashes a ferocious impulse that propels him forward with savage urgency. The goat moves a few centimeters. Its movements are firm and precise, adapted to the terrain without wasting energy. She doesn't run away, she simply changes position and forces the bear to follow her along a steeper section. The distance between them remains constant, but the slope becomes more brutal. The predator climbs with effort, its claws failing to catch as its tense muscles begin to tremble, and a harsh growl tries to assert itself over the terrain, but fails. Everything the bear has as an advantage down there disappears at this height. The goat climbs another section, and the rock becomes narrower as the drop becomes steeper. With each step, it maintains absolute precision and wastes no energy. Behind her, the climb becomes a punishment. The bear's body carries its own strength like a curse, and every meter gained transforms into wear and tear, while each step adds another risk. But the prey is near, and hunger drives him more than prudence, and the desire to reach it overcomes any warning the mountain sends him, even when those warnings are clear. The goat moves forward to a higher ledge, almost invisible from below. There it stops. It doesn't run, it doesn't pant. It looks in the direction of the bear with a calmness that doesn't belong to fear. Beneath their hooves, small stones detach and fall. The sound is faint, but enough to catch the bear's attention. He interprets it as a mistake, a blunder, an opportunity. Without measuring the angle and without thinking, it advances with a brute impulse that throws it forward, powerful but not intelligent. That rock, that slope, and that edge were not made for him. One miscalculated step is all it takes, and the ground beneath its weight creaks, tilts, and gives way. The bear tries to correct itself, but it's too late, and its body slips, loses its footing, and grazes the stone wall with a sharp scraping sound that cuts through the air before it plummets. The whole world seems to fall with him as he strikes hard protrusions and raises clouds of dust that scatter into the void, and the echo of his body against the rock spreads through the mountain. Gravity finishes what the goat barely hinted at, and when everything stops at the bottom of the ravine, there is no movement left. From its vantage point, the goat observes without a trace of triumph or celebration, only with the certainty of a simple truth that reigns at these heights. In the mountains, brute force does not always rule. It is the one who understands the terrain who prevails, not the one who faces it blindly. Below lies the predator motionless, and above remains alive what once appeared to be prey. Two destinies separated not by combat, but by the difference between knowing the mountain and disobeying it. The goat turns slowly and continues on its way, disappearing once more into the mountain crevices. The wind sweeps across the ledge, dust descends, and the final echo of the fall fades away. At this height, only stillness remains, and that stillness reveals something that decides life here. Intelligence weighs more than strength. With one last glance into the void, the goat turns its head and resumes its journey. As if death were just another element of the landscape, the slope steepens again and his gait becomes more precise. Each step is a reading of the terrain, discerning a tiny crack, a rough edge, and a protrusion eroded by years of wind. Where any other species would find an impenetrable wall, the mountain goat distinguishes routes that seem invisible and advances with a certainty that does not come from luck, but from the absolute mastery it has over the rock. The mountain is not a makeshift refuge, it is their natural territory. For millions of years, this species has learned to exist in a place where life seems improbable. While predators dominated the valleys, mountain goats rose into a territory where brute force was no longer a threat. At that harsh, isolated height, evolution has refined every part of their bodies to adapt to verticality. They don't need speed on flat terrain. They need to cling to walls that other animals would never dare to touch, and their short, flexible frame absorbs every vibration of the rock to maintain their balance. The senses accompanied this adaptation and were shaped by the terrain. Sight learns to read shadows and textures that reveal which parts of the rock will give way and which will remain firm. Hearing detects the distant fall of a loose fragment and anticipates unsafe routes. Even the sense of smell, though subtle, recognizes the faint trace of mosses and lichens that grow where moisture accumulates at high altitudes. Every detail is crucial because food is scarce at this point, and it comes from places only she can reach. Unlike lowland herbivores, the mountain goat doesn't feed wherever it wants, but wherever it can. The small, tough shoots it finds among crevices are enough to sustain it because its multi-chambered stomach allows internal microorganisms to break down fibers that other animals cannot process. And this ability gives it the energy needed to tackle this rugged terrain. However, that energy is not enough in a single place, and it forces it to move for hours through vertical sections that can extend for several kilometers. In this constant journey, the environment decides what it can find. When the rock receives heat and minimal vegetation peeks out between the sloping walls, it climbs to reach those dwarf shrubs that only grow at high altitudes. When the cold dominates the mountain and snow covers the ground, scrape the icy surface to find grass trapped under the white layer, and each of those bites requires meters of ascent on fragile cornices that can give way with a bad footing. Under these conditions, their bodies also adapt, and their fur becomes denser, forming a thick layer that retains heat even on windswept slopes. During the mating period, that same thickness acquires a rough shine that allows the male to prevail over other competitors. This adaptation doesn't end with the fur. Its entire anatomy responds with extreme precision. The hooves are divided into two movable points that open and close according to the angle. The outer edge, hard as a wedge, grips the stone, while the inner pad adjusts to minute irregularities. This combination creates points of contact so small they seem impossible. This same logic of balance appears in other parts of the body. The horns, curved backward, not only serve a defensive function but also balance the center of gravity, keep the head aligned on steep descents, and act as a natural counterweight during jumps. In the mountains, every journey is a silent negotiation with the void. The goat moves along a wall where the space to place a hoof is less than the width of a human finger, and yet it progresses with a constant calculation that combines memory and precision. His body recognizes angles, directions, and distances as he climbs a near-vertical wall, makes a short jump to a narrow ledge, and ascends further thanks to his familiarity with terrain that would be impossible for others. This movement stems from a deep-rooted heritage that doesn't bestow the complete skill, but rather the foundation for its development. During the early stages of life, progress is brief and hesitant, but each attempt refines an ancient instinct that has been honed at these heights for generations. What appears to be a natural talent is, in reality, the union between a long-standing memory and the daily learning that transforms that impulse into precision. This accumulated skill propels her to higher areas where the mountain offers a panorama that is not made for contemplation, but for vigilance. The goat stops its march at a point where the stone widens into a gentler slope, and there it chews on a small dry bud while observing the distant valleys. From these heights, it not only maintains a dominant view of the territory, but also reduces the risk of being reached by predators that cannot follow it to these almost vertical walls. His eyes, with horizontal pupils capable of expanding the visual field, allow him to take in the landscape from one end to the other without moving his head, a form of perception very different from that of humans and designed to detect any alteration at the edge of his vision. He doesn't act out of fear, he interprets signs he's always known. The wind carries smells he recognizes even in the dead of winter, the scent of herbs, dampness on the stone, and sometimes the presence of an intruder. At this point, the advantage doesn't come from hiding, but from anticipating danger before it takes shape. This anticipation gives it time, although it does not guarantee the absence of threats, because some predators are able to reach it even in places where the terrain seems impossible. When this happens, the height ceases to be a refuge, and the goat must resort to quick decisions that do not depend on the slope but on its own judgment. And then an inevitable question arises. What happens when danger reaches her at a point where there is no higher level to escape to? The answer appears when the landscape changes. The goat descends towards a wide stretch where the mountain softens and the rocks form sloping terraces. She has gone down in search of a corridor where food is more frequent and the rock offers less demanding routes, although this apparent ease also reduces the distance that separates her from any threat. The wind blows more gently and the natural steps make progress easier, but every meter gained exposes her a little more. With this increased exposure, his movement also changes. His gait becomes faster and more fluid. He adjusts his posture, seeks wider footing, and moves forward with a steady pace that allows him to cover more distance in less time. It no longer relies on sharp precipices to stay safe, but on the speed with which it assesses its immediate surroundings. As you move through this more open section, vulnerability increases because the terrain offers space to move, but also for others to approach unseen. In this accessible area, danger does not rise from below, but emerges from a silent side that the mountain hides too easily. In that narrow strip of land where the ledges cast shadows barely touched by the sun, a young puma waits motionless. Its fur blends perfectly with the grey of the cliff, and its steps make no sound. Unlike the bear that relied on strength and momentum, this predator moves with honed precision. It doesn't need cliffs or brutal speed. It only requires an angle, a mistake, a moment of distraction. And for a moment, it seems he has it. The goat doesn't see it, but it senses it. It's not a smell or a sound. It's a slight tremor at the edge of the stone, a minimal vibration that only a body accustomed to these mountains could detect. He raises his head. His ears twitch. His pupils narrow. He doesn't run. He takes a step back, gauges the angle beneath his limbs, and turns his body just enough to face what's approaching. The puma decides to attack. It advances first with a slow, almost hovering movement, and then launches itself with a short, precise burst of speed. He's not aiming for a long leap that would expose him to the void. He wants to land on her from the side and force her back. The goat knows this. Her muscles tense, but not to escape. It lowers its head, lowers its horns, and waits a fraction of a second longer, measuring not the predator, but the mountain itself. When the feline lunges, the collision is not violent. There is no direct charge or frontal impact. She barely turns her neck, just enough for the antlers to intercept the puma's body at an unexpected point, her shoulder. It doesn't hurt him. It doesn't knock him down. It simply alters the trajectory of his attack. The predator lands where he didn't intend to, on a strip of loose gravel that his claws can't grip. The puma slips. Its hind legs search for support, but the mountain throws it off balance. It stops in time without falling, but with ragged breathing and its gaze fixed on the goat. There it understands that its prey is neither naive, nor clumsy, nor slow. The goat watches him without fear, motionless, its head bowed in a gesture that is not a challenge, but a silent warning. Here too it knows how to defend itself. The feline retreats, not because it fears a blow, but because it recognizes that the mountain is on its side, not its. He takes a few steps back, regains his balance, and finally vanishes into the shadows of the ledge, realizing that this prey requires more risk than the reward is worth. The goat remains still for a moment, then it raises its head, adjusts its posture, and continues on its way with the same calm with which it began. For her, it wasn't a victory, just the right decision made at the right time. In this field, intelligence is not a privilege. It is rather the only way to continue living. And in that silent advance, it reveals something few creatures achieve. Every choice it makes on the stone, every edge it uses to move leaves a minimal trace that other goats will recognize in the future. Over time, these routes become inherited paths, invisible lines that the species has built generation after generation. The mountain doesn't guard them, they shape it. And as it climbs to a new slope, a question more profound than the recent danger remains in the air. How many other creatures, small and silent, have learned to turn their fragility into an advantage? The answer is not at the top, but a little further down, where the mountain begins to transform. As the terrain levels out, the air changes. The dry cold of the high altitude dissipates, and a light humidity appears, heralding another world. The cracked stone gives way to dark earth, covered with old leaves, moss, and roots, searching for water beneath the surface. Far from the precipices where the goat maintains its balance, the world closes in around tall tree trunks and deep shadows. Here danger doesn't come from below, but from every direction. Among those silent tree trunks, a reddish figure glides almost undisturbed by the landscape. The red fox moves close to the ground, its tail low and its body relaxed but never distracted. His footsteps don't break branches, move stones, or announce his presence. He doesn't need to impose himself by size or strength. In this environment, his greatest resource is not his body, but his mind. An exceptional ability to read the forest as if it were a book he has known for years. Every night he repeats routes that no one else sees. They are not marked trails or visible footprints, but invisible lines that connect shelters, safe clearings, and observation points. This constant repetition haunts his understanding of the forest. Over time, he learns which branches creak and which remain silent, which hollow trunks serve as passageways, and which accumulate odors best avoided. Nothing in his progress happens by chance, because each journey adds details to an internal map that combines memory and experience. Even when he seems to move aimlessly, he follows a pattern that only he knows. That same precision extends to its sense of smell, which separates the forest into layers. It perceives damp earth, old bark, cold rock, and stagnant water. Among those nuances, he recognizes what really matters, such as the recent passage of a deer, the presence of a wild boar that dug in search of roots, or the distant mark of a feral dog that crossed the area during the afternoon. He doesn't seek out these species to hunt them. He identifies them because they reveal how the forest has changed in the last few hours. Knowing who passed through, when and where they went is a way to anticipate opportunities and avoid dangers that aren't always visible. And all of that converges into a reading that very few animals can perform. Where others perceive only a faint scent of vegetation, he deciphers a complete record of movements and intentions, one more layer of the map he constructs each night. This constant attention isn't limited to smell. It extends to hearing as well. The triangular shape of its ears and their independent movement allow it to detect minute vibrations even at great distances. Its long, narrow ear canal amplifies sounds that would be lost among the leaves for other animals. That's why it listens to the forest with meticulous precision, its ears moving tirelessly as they adjust to the smallest detail. Thanks to this auditory clarity, it recognizes minute variations in the environment. An insect moves under the bark, a branch bends without the wind's intervention, and a bird's song suddenly stops. For him, none of that is noise, but information that tells him which areas are quiet, which ones hide unexpected movement, and which sectors should be avoided before moving forward. This meticulous reading of its surroundings guides its every move. It avoids open clearings if the forest offers it the chance to advance through dense shadows, where its reddish fur dissolves into fragments of light and darkness. Its hearing registers variations so subtle that it can detect when the environment ceases to behave as it should. That's why that night, as he skirted a small stream hidden by vegetation, he noticed a change in the usual pattern. It wasn't a roar or an obvious rustling, it was the opposite, silence where there should have been movement. A section of the forest that just minutes before echoed with the murmur of birds and the rustling of leaves now seems still. The fox stops too. Raise your head slightly, sniff carefully, let the air carry information that your eyes cannot yet give you. Between the dampness of the moss and the metallic smell of the water, a new note emerges, weak but unmistakable, a recent and still warm feline trace in the language of smell. He doesn't need to see it, because that barely hinted presence is enough to understand that a lynx is roaming the area, and it moves with the same discretion with which he roams the forest. The fox neither freezes nor quickens its pace. It simply changes course as if remembering a pending destination in another direction, and moves towards a slope that appears less safe, steeper, with more fallen branches and visible obstacles that would deter any other animal, but which for it represent a known advantage. It moves with ease on this type of terrain. It recognizes the unevenness, identifies exposed roots, and distinguishes firm stones under the leaf litter. And as it moves forward, it further reduces the noise of its gait, placing its toes first and then gently lowering its weight. If the lynx decides to follow him, he will not find an animal fleeing in panic, but a shadow dissolving into a terrain where mistakes are quickly punished. Upon reaching a small clearing covered by low bushes, the fox approaches an abandoned burrow that it has inspected many times. The entrance is narrow, the exit invisible to the naked eye. It doesn't occupy it, it doesn't fully enter. It only leaves its concentrated scent at the edge, as if it were a refuge it intends to use. Then it moves a few meters away and hides among roots, at a distance sufficient to observe without being seen. If the lynx decides to follow that scent, it will approach the wrong place, wasting time and energy, while its potential prey is already at the other end of the forest. The wind shifts direction, bringing with it a slight movement through the trees. A large shadow passes silently against the light, its sound heralded by the birds that resume their fluttering in another part of the forest. For the fox, that reaction is confirmation. The predator has entered the area, although its exact location is still unknown. With that certainty, the invisible paths of the forest once again work in his favor. He retreats into one of those narrow corridors that only his size allows him to use, and advances without disturbing the rhythm of the forest. It glides between low branches, passes behind a lichen-covered rock, and stops next to a fallen log that almost completely hides it. From that natural cover, he remains motionless and listens to the soft footsteps of the lynx approaching the place where he left its scent most concentrated. He doesn't need to see it because he senses it in the way the leaves shift and the forest changes its rhythm. The predator inspects the empty burrow, hesitates for a few moments, sniffs the entrance, and moves a few meters further, confused. The trail offers no clear direction, and no markings on the ground indicate how to follow it. Suddenly it seems to scatter in multiple directions. Meanwhile, the fox, a few meters away, breathes silently, its body motionless and its eyes open, making sure the distance increases before moving again. When the lynx finally walks away, disappointed by a trail that leads nowhere, the fox neither celebrates nor gets agitated. He waits. Let the danger completely leave the area. Let the sounds return to their normal state. Let the strong smells dissipate. Only then does he get up and resume his journey, as if that detour had been part of his routine from the beginning. In fact, it is. His entire life consists of adjusting the course before the danger fully takes shape. In this forest, the fox is not known for its size, strength, or speed. Its real advantage lies in understanding its surroundings better than anyone else. Their survival depends not on confrontation, but on early reading of the environment, on the exact memory of each potential refuge, and on the speed with which they change course when the signs cease to be reliable. That form of intelligence doesn't create spectacular scenes, but it sustains its daily existence in a world full of predators who will never see its face up close. And while the forest offers him secret routes to escape danger, a doubt persists that grows denser when everything falls silent. What happens when the threat appears so close that there is no longer any room to avoid it? The silence left by the lynx slowly dissipates. The forest regains its natural rhythm, and the fox advances a few more meters until it finds a narrow space among the roots where it rests when the night has drained its energy. There it huddles, hidden beneath the damp earth, and the forest continues its rhythm until the sky begins to clear. At first light, he leaves his shelter and resumes his journey. The dampness of dawn still hangs in the air and the shadows are shorter, but the danger hasn't disappeared. It has only changed form. Then it happens. It doesn't rise from the ground or the bushes, but from above in a brief flash that interrupts the light. A shadow crosses the clearing without touching it, and the fox perceives it before he understands it. The threat now comes from the sky. The fox stops, its ears turn back with an almost imperceptible movement. It hears no flapping of wings. The golden eagles do not announce their arrival. The only thing that betrays the predator is the abrupt cut in the clarity, a small eclipse that arises when one of its wings grazes the edge of the sun. The forest protects it from terrestrial predators, but against a vertical attack there is no easy refuge. In such a narrow clearing, the distance between life and death is measured in millimeters. The first attack comes almost without warning. The fox instinctively ducks as a gust of wind grazes its back and an agile shadow cuts through the air with a precision that defies instinct. On the ground, leaves leap in a green cloud, revealing a fresh furrow opened by claws designed to break bones. The small mammal leaps back, surprised by the proximity of the attack. Above, the raptor climbs back up as quickly as it descended and gains altitude again. It hasn't missed. It's just looking for the perfect angle. The small carnivore recognizes that running in a straight line would be a fatal mistake. In open terrain, golden eagles can reach speeds of over 200 kilometers per hour, and no amount of ground running can compete with a vertical attack. Even so, it doesn't give up. Its slender, flexible body is designed for sharp turns and changes of direction that a heavy predator can't replicate. Even now, with adrenaline tense in every muscle, his mind continues to analyze the terrain faster than his own strides. With that constant calculation as his guide, he takes advantage of every contour of the ground. It makes a false turn to the right, pretending to seek cover among the scattered bushes. The eagle, observing from above, immediately corrects its trajectory and anticipates the slope of the terrain to prepare for a cleaner dive. That's when the fox changes its plan. It abandons the safe path and runs straight towards an area where the ground has a depression covered with leaves. It's not a refuge. It's a trap for anyone who doesn't know its depths. The bird seizes the exact moment. It half folds its wings, and the world beneath it transforms into a straight line that guides it without deviation. The beak points at the reddish body crossing the clearing, and the talons tense for impact as the wind sharpens the descent. The silence thickens, and the distance shrinks with a precision that seems definitive. But the fox doesn't continue running. Just as the shadow completely covers him, his body shifts to the side. He doesn't stumble, he lets himself fall as if abandoning his energy at the last second. From the sky, the winged hunter tries to adjust its descent to correct the unexpected movement, but that slight deviation breaks the perfect line that sustained its dive. And in an attack where precision is everything, a single degree is enough to throw off balance. The turn happens in an instant. As the bird extends its talons in the air, the small ground hunter rolls to its left and propels itself through the leaf litter with a sharp movement that breaks the trajectory of the attack. It's not trying to escape. It's trying to cut off the angle of attack, to disrupt the predator's aerodynamic flow. The eagle skims the ground, loses speed, and strikes a low branch as it tries to regain altitude. It's not a serious injury, but it does cause a break in its momentum. The fox doesn't stop to look. It immediately runs toward an even denser area of the forest where the bushes form a maze of narrow openings. Its slender legs and flexible body allow it to enter with ease. Inside, it twists, dodges roots, and disappears into a tunnel of vegetation that no large predator could follow. It's a refuge not by strength, but by design. Only someone who understands the forest could make their way there. The eagle tries to recover. It rises a few meters, flaps its wings to stabilize itself, and circles back over the area where it lost sight of the fox. From above, the forest is a uniform surface, a green puzzle where the prey becomes invisible. He searches from different angles, tries short descents, and finally climbs higher. But the lost energy, the slight bump against the branch, and the lack of visibility make the risk outweigh the reward. The air, once her ally, now seems like an unstable wall. The winged huntress flies away with one last sweeping turn, leaving the clearing behind in search of safer routes. Only then, several meters further on, does the fox emerge from a narrow gap between roots and advance calmly without a trace of fear. It shakes its front legs to dislodge the stuck leaves and resumes its gait as if nothing had happened. He understood the situation before the predator did. He read the fall, the angle, the light, and the forest itself. He didn't flee. He waited for the other's mistake to turn it into an advantage. As he walks away, his gait is light and silent. He doesn't look up because he knows they are no longer following him. He doesn't celebrate because nature doesn't reward victory, only permanence. The forest returns to its usual rhythm, branches creaking in the distance, the murmur of the wind through the treetops, and a faint trill scattered among the leaves. The threat vanished as quickly as it had arrived. The fox continues on his way in the shade of the trees. Each step he takes reaffirms the subtext that sustains his life. It is not strength that keeps him alive, but his accurate reading of the world around him. He possesses a wit that doesn't impose itself, but flows. His cunning doesn't confront. It diverts, deceives, redirects, resists, and there, in the middle of the forest, his figure seems as natural as the light through the leaves, tailor-made for the territory he traverses. He hasn't won a battle, he's bought time. And in the silent balance of the forest, that time is the purest form of survival there is. The forest regains its silence after the red fox passes, but not for long. In the distance, beneath the layer of damp leaves, a deep rumble begins, almost imperceptible at first, like a drum hidden underground. The thin branches vibrate with that pulse, and some birds leave the highest treetops, moving towards quieter areas. The air, once light and dispersed, becomes denser, laden with the smell of disturbed earth and moving bodies. Something large is approaching, something the forest has recognized for generations. Very soon the first silhouettes emerge from the low mist that hovers near the ground. They are deer, advancing in a wide formation, like a silent river winding its way through the tree trunks. There is no disorder in their steps, even though no one gives instructions. Each individual seems to know exactly where to stand, how much space to leave, and when to stop. Their bodies glide among the trees with an ease that only comes from the habit of repeating the same journey year after year. The migration reaches the valley, and with it the balance of the forest is restored. The place that receives them is not arbitrary. It is a valley protected by gentle slopes where the light filters through a canopy of intertwined branches, and the ground offers a mixture of tender grasses, young shoots, and scattered shrubs. The humidity keeps the moss alive on the stones, and the smell of bark and decaying leaves announces that the forest is still breathing. For a herd of herbivores, this site means food, rest, and shelter from the wind that lashes the open areas outside. Here, if they stay alert, they can spend an entire season without overexposing themselves. At the center of this controlled advance moves the alpha male. His broad, symmetrical antlers are not only a display of strength, but also a testament to years of survival and silent victories. Each scar on his neck and flanks tells a story of well-resolved shoves, collisions, and slips. He walks with a sober confidence without needing to prove anything with each step, since there is always a free space around him, a distance of respect that the other males do not dare to cross. He doesn't need to remember his role because the entire forest recognizes him. The females gather around him, following closely behind. Their bodies are lighter, their movements more agile, but the confidence with which they position themselves behind him speaks of a well-established hierarchy. They know that near that male they are more likely to access the best grazing areas and to detect any threat in time. It's not just about reproduction, but about accumulated experience. An alpha who maintains his position for several seasons is, for the others, a promise of stability in an environment where nothing is guaranteed. A little further back, although without losing visual contact with the main group, moves the least prestigious group of the flock. It is the bachelor group, made up of young males who have not yet managed to establish themselves and some adults who have lost their place in previous seasons. Some show incomplete or asymmetrical antlers, others limp slightly when putting weight on a leg, others simply look tired. They are not excluded from the group, but neither are they part of the circle that defines important decisions. They are witnesses and aspirants, never protagonists. Among them is one that stands out. It doesn't stand out for its size because it doesn't yet match the alpha in weight or muscle mass. Its antlers have grown in a good shape without fractures or obvious marks, but they still lack the breadth of the established males. What sets him apart is not his body, but the way he interacts with the world around him. His eyes scan his surroundings with constant attention, lingering on details that others ignore. A freshly broken branch, a faint scent on the wind, a change in the rhythm of the ground beneath his hooves. He's not restless, he's observant. When the herd first stops to feed, the entire valley seems to exhale. The deer disperse in a wide fan, lowering their heads toward the buds emerging from among the old leaves. The alpha male chooses a small rise from which he can effortlessly watch over the females while they move about calmly, confident that any threat will be detected in time, further away in the least valued area. The single men eat without haste, although with their eyes attentive to any hesitation in the leader's behavior. The forest fills with a soft murmur of biting mouths and yielding branches. It is during this first break that one of the young males makes a decision that changes the way the protagonist observes the group. He slowly separates from the group of bachelors and moves toward the alpha. His neck lengthens, his steps become more tense, and his ears remain fixed forward. He makes no attempt to hide his intentions, quite the contrary, he announces them with every movement. The air seems to grow thicker around him, while some females raise their heads to watch the scene intently. The alpha shifts his body slightly but doesn't move immediately. He analyzes the challenger with a calmness that isn't indifference but experience. He has seen this scene many times. The young man continues advancing until he is at a distance where any escape would be difficult. He lowers his head, displays his antlers, and tenses his shoulder muscles. His breathing is more about impulse than strategy. He doesn't calculate, he pushes. The outcome is decided before it even begins. The clash is brief and decisive. The alpha takes a single step forward at the precise moment and positions his antlers at an angle that deflects the force of the opposing blow without exposing himself too much. He doesn't charge head-on, but from the side, shifting his weight toward the youngster's flank. The impact knocks the challenger off his feet, who loses his footing on the uneven ground and slips a few meters before regaining his balance. Before it can readjust, the alpha has already returned to its initial position as if nothing had happened. The attempt is dismissed in seconds. The females lower their heads back to the grass, as if the outcome didn't warrant further attention. The rest of the bachelors keep their distance, absorbing the lesson without needing to approach. The defeated young man returns to the group, breathing heavily and looking down, not so much from physical pain as from the confirmation of his place. No one expels him, no one comforts him. In the logic of the herd, what has just happened is part of the natural order of things. Only one follows the scene down to the last detail. The watchful young stag hasn't moved throughout the entire confrontation. He observes the moment the challenger lowers his head too soon, the way he neglects his rear support, the speed with which he charges without studying the terrain. It also records the alpha response, the accuracy of the lateral step, the exact location of the antlers when intercepting the blow, and the calculation of the weight needed to destabilize the other without compromising its own balance. He doesn't just see force, he sees chained decisions. As the sun dips a few degrees and the forest begins to darken, the young man raises his head. He doesn't test the ground or take a step forward. He isn't ready to challenge anyone, and his body knows it. But in the stillness of his muscles, something begins to change. He doesn't yet have the physique of an alpha male or the scars that distinguish veterans. Yet he has gained something that other single men don't seek. He understands that in this forest, strength alone is not enough, and it is in that silence among branches that barely move and breathes that mingle with the wind that his gaze ceases to be that of a mere spectator. Without moving a muscle, he begins to occupy another space, still invisible to the rest of the pack. It's not a challenge, at least not for now. It's more patient and more dangerous. It's about learning before attacking. As night recedes and the first light pierces the foliage, the herd disperses among the trees. The young deer remains vigilant, following every sound that creeps through the bark and grass. Nothing about him is accidental. He observes how the adults move, how they gauge distances, how they react to every creak. He doesn't participate. He records and memorizes every gesture. In an environment where force decides quickly, he understands that information decides first. While the others graze without urgency, the forest changes tone. The birds suspend their songs, and a subtle tension passes through the clearing. A wolf emerges from among the tree trunks, advancing with a clumsy gait, head down, one hind leg dragging with each step. It seems weak, almost defeated by the terrain. The deer barely glance at him. A wounded predator poses minimal risk. They all calmly retreat, except for one who remains motionless, bewildered by the scene. The young deer hides among dense ferns. It doesn't tremble, it doesn't run, it watches. The wolf continues advancing with uneven slowness, as if each movement required an enormous effort. A few meters away, the adult deer takes a step back, enough to free itself from the angle of attack, but not enough to escape. It all seems like an unimportant encounter, an act that will end when the predator surrenders and retreats into the shadows. Then it happens. The wolf stops its limp. The adult deer barely manages to turn its head before the grey body brings it down with a dry, violent force. The trap snaps shut in a blink. The weakness was a disguise, the movement, a deception, the intention, always hidden. The young deer feels its breathing quicken, but it makes no sound. It doesn't intervene, it understands. It retreats without a single branch rustling. It slips among the roots and disappears as the forest absorbs the sound of the struggle. What he has witnessed is not just death, but something deeper. Information can kill. A predator doesn't need to be stronger to win. Sometimes it's enough to appear weaker. Knowledge is seared into his memory like a razor's edge. Hours later, when the danger has passed, the pack regroups. The bachelors keep their distance from the group of females, and the alpha stands guard with the confidence of one who has never been caught off guard. His antlers are long, perfect and imposing. No rival approaches him without announcing their intentions, and none has managed to unsettle him. The young man watches him from behind the trunk of a pine tree. His eyes don't focus on the alpha's strength, but on his patterns, when he raises his head, when he leaves a flank exposed, when he becomes overconfident. That night, the forest smells different. The dampness condenses on the grass and covers the fresh footprints. The others rest, but the young man remains awake. His mind replays the events, the feigned limp, the stooped posture, the exact moment the trap was revealed. He doesn't understand concepts. He doesn't formulate human plans, but he recognizes correlations. The disguise works. The mistake arises when the other person believes they have understood what they see. As dawn breaks, the herd moves toward a wide clearing where the shadows offer no hiding places. It's the perfect territory for tests of strength, and several males of varying sizes approach with their usual uncertainty. Will today be the day one of them challenges the leader? But none of them are getting ahead. They all know their place, even the youngest, all of them, except one. The young stag separates from the group of bachelors and walks slowly toward the center of the clearing. His steps are uneven, his head down, his breathing slow. The others look at him without interest. He seems tired, he seems hurt. The alpha observes him for barely 2 seconds and turns his gaze back to his females, convinced that there is no threat in that body that moves as if the forest weighed on it. But the young man keeps moving forward, limping with precision. The females sense their approach, but they are not alarmed. The air is still and the clearing is open. There is no violence in that weak march, only an echo of submission. The alpha doesn't move. He doesn't consider it necessary to defend his position against a male who doesn't even walk upright. 3 meters from the leader, the young man stops his limp. His body changes immediately. His spine tenses, the muscles rise beneath the skin, the antlers tilt forward. The alpha doesn't have time to react. The young man launches himself at him with an energy that seemed non-existent, impacting his exposed side. The blow is sharp, decisive. The leader stumbles, surprised not by the force, but by the lie. The clash lasts for a few moments. With each movement, the young man repeats the learned pattern. He doesn't attack head-on. He doesn't offer an obvious indication of his intentions. Take advantage of angles, press where the alpha doesn't expect it, back off to force it to fail, and reload. It's a duel that won't be decided by power, but by calculation. And in that arena, the youngster has the advantage. Finally, the alpha takes a step back, then another. Its antlers barely dip towards the ground. It's not a dramatic defeat, but it is a definitive one. The females watch him in silence. The forest seems to hold its breath. The young man neither celebrates nor roars. He simply stands upright, breathing slowly. Their victory does not stem from force, but from understanding something that others have overlooked. In these forests, anticipation is worth more than resistance. The singles look at him with a newfound respect, as if something had shifted in the invisible structure of the group. He's no older than them, no heavier, no more intimidating. But now everyone senses that he faces the world differently. The entire clearing seems to reorganize itself around that certainty. And while the shadows move among the tree trunks and the herd silently accepts its new hierarchy, another story begins to take shape far away, in a place where the light falls differently and the heat dictates other rules. The question emerges silently, as inevitable as the cycle of the day. How does intelligence express itself when the territory is different and danger has a different rhythm? The twilight sinks in among roots that intertwine like ancient veins. The soil breathes moisture and the darkness forms passages that extend deep into the earth. A narrow tunnel retains a dense atmosphere, detached from everything happening on the surface. Something moves inside, barely a stealthy glide across the loose earth. Two eyes open in the darkness. They blink cautiously, then move forward. A compact figure confidently pushes through the ground, sensing the temperature dropping from above and the vibrations that herald a different world. It ascends one last stretch and emerges into the sun, leaving behind the shadow of the tunnel to face a landscape where nothing resembles the forest that was left behind. The light envelops it completely. The heat beats down intensely. The air smells of dust and dried sap. The earth is reddish, hard, marked by cracks that spread like scars. The honey badger pauses for a moment, sniffs and surveys the open landscape. Its robust body is tense, not from fear, but from habit. The savannah welcomes him like a long-time resident. The light stripe down its back contrasts with the dark fur covering its flanks. Its thick skin stretches and yields with improbable flexibility, capable of withstanding bites, blows, and cuts. It walks with a firm, almost defiant stride, as if it understands that its territory is not for sale. Its evolutionary strategy is not to flee or hide, but to intelligently confront what others would avoid. The scent guides him through the short shadows of the acacia trees. Light tracks mark the sand, a herbivore recently passed by. But among those tracks, another sign emerges, deeper, more rigid. The badger tilts its head, sniffs again, and confirms its suspicions. A porcupine advances not far away, its quills rustling with a metallic sound that warns of danger to anyone who gets too close. The small mammal bristles upon sensing the badger's presence. It raises its quills, pointing them towards the threat in a warning gesture. But the badger doesn't back down. It measures the distance with short, calculated movements, slowly circling without losing sight of its angle of attack. He does not act recklessly. He observes, analyzes, and waits for the exact opening he needs to move without overexposing himself. The first attack comes quickly. The porcupine darts to one side, trying to wound or scare away. The badger dodges with precision and retreats only a few steps. Its gaze never leaves the quills. He takes a wider detour, tries a second angle, and then a third. He's gauging more than just the body in front of him. He's deciphering rhythm, distance, and strength. When he finds the moment he's been waiting for, he advances without hesitation. He launches himself towards the only area where the spikes can't reach him, right behind the bristling shield. There it bites firmly, holding the animal without hurting itself. The porcupine tries to turn, scraping its back with a couple of loose quills, but the badger's skin barely gives way. The confrontation lasts for seconds that seem tense and long. Finally, the porcupine retreats, realizing that persistence would be futile. It slithers away, its breath ragged and quills vibrating in silent surrender. The badger watches it go without giving chase. He's not trying to kill him or wear himself out with an unnecessary victory. He's simply reclaiming what he considers his space, food, and respect in a territory where few challenge him. He stands alone under the sun. He breathes heavily, but not wearily. He shakes the dirt from his fur and continues onward with the serenity of one accustomed to surviving surrounded by danger. The barbed wire trap is behind him, but it doesn't stop him. He emerges from the undergrowth, his body low and his eyes burning with a hunger that the dawn cannot quell. He has withstood the first challenge of the day, and now he returns to what brought him to the surface, the relentless search for food, a daily routine that allows no rest. It stops, sniffs the air, and digs with quick, almost mechanical movements. Its claws dig into the dry earth, raising clouds of dust as it extracts larvae, termites, and beetles buried just below the surface. Each swish of its feet dislodges roots and fragments of nests. It consumes whatever it finds without delicacy. Crunchy insects, soft larvae, small worms that provide it with meager but essential calories. It needs to repeat this process dozens of times. To survive in the African heat, it must ingest hundreds of small bodies a day. Its fast, voracious metabolism demands more than the terrain typically provides. Although each digging could mean a trap, a snake, a scorpion, a reptile hidden underground, the badger never hesitates. He raises his head as soon as he finishes and moves forward with the same determination, driven not by force but by a type of courage that does not run out. That of someone who has nothing to lose and knows every crack in the territory. Danger is part of his life, a constant that doesn't intimidate him. It drives him. When he emerges into an open area, daylight has already spread across the savannah. The light falls directly without any shadows to protect it. It is there that the wind changes. A deep vibration crosses the grass. It's not sound, it's pressure. The badger stops. It stiffens its body. It has felt it many times, but that doesn't make it any less decisive. From a distance, two figures approach with the measured pace of those who know they dominate the terrain. An adult lioness and a young male advancing beside her. The cats sense it. They don't pounce immediately, they observe it. They size it up. Such a small animal shouldn't be a risk, but neither should it be a reward. The lioness moves forward, curious, testing the waters with silent steps. The badger doesn't back down. He lowers his body, exposes his shoulders, and spreads his legs for support. His crest bristles, his jaws are tense. In an instant, he changes from hunter to prey. The lioness opens her mouth, showing her fangs, not to attack yet, but to warn him of his position in the chain. The badger responds with a growl that shouldn't intimidate anyone that size. However, she stops. Something about the badger's posture tells her it won't be easy prey. It's not its smell, its size, or its strength, it's its unusual decisiveness. When the young male tries to circle him, the badger reacts. He doesn't flee, he attacks. He lunges at the flank of the more inexperienced male with a brief, violent thrust, aimed at the exact spot where the skin is most sensitive. It's a swift blow, almost symbolic, but enough to upset the balance. The lion recoils with a surprised bellow, more from the audacity than from pain. The lioness tenses. Now she moves in forcefully. She slashes with her paw, a blow that could cut such a small animal in two. The badger dodges by inches, rolls, gets up, and faces her again, meeting her directly. He rises up on his hind legs for a moment to appear larger, more assertive, more determined. The lioness hesitates. She doesn't understand this reaction. She doesn't perceive fear, but conviction. The young male tries to intervene again, but hesitates when the badger stands in front of him, hardened like a burning rock in the middle of the dust. For a few seconds, the three animals remain motionless. Tension hangs between them like an invisible thread. Each one waits for the other to move. The savannah becomes a silent circle where only danger breathes. The lioness decides. She closes her mouth, turns her head, and changes direction. A confrontation that could cost her energy or leave her injured isn't worth it. The male follows her, still confused by the experience. The badger stays put until the silhouettes disappear into the tall grass. Only then does it descend the ridge and continue walking as if nothing had happened. His victory is not strength, it's character. In other parts of the world, survival is determined by intelligence, memory, or strategy. But here, in this scorching and unforgiving corner of the continent, the rule is different. Life doesn't always reward those who think, nor those who evade. It rewards those who dare. Every species finds its own path, and the honey badgers, forged by heat, scarcity, and the pressure of the planet's greatest predators, led it to another extreme of evolution. The brutal certainty that sometimes moving forward without retreating is the only way to continue existing. Here, where every day is a risk and every shadow is a possibility of death, bravery is also a form of intelligence. But even so, after so many challenges in so few hours, her day is not over yet. The badger moves forward through dry bushes, dragging a weariness that is noticeable in every stride. The sun sets and transforms the landscape into a reddish plain where everything seems to stand still for a moment. Its paws are marked with scratches, its fur matted with dust and dried blood. However, his gaze remains steady. He doesn't walk with the haste of hunger or the urgency of fear, but with the stubbornness of someone who has survived too long to consider rest a near priority. The wind dies down, leaving an eerie, almost attentive silence in the air. Among the shadows of thick undergrowth, something moves with the smoothness of a thread gliding over stone. The badger stops without fully turning his head. He barely twitches one ear. He doesn't need to see to know he's not alone. In front of him, a dark figure emerges from the short grass and rises with calculated slowness. The Cape Cobra extends its neck, drawing a perfect arc that trembles slightly in the light of the setting sun, as if the air itself were receding to make room for it. The badger does not back down, once again standing firm, rooted to the ground, measuring the distance between them as if that exact margin were part of a learned ritual. The cobra hisses, swaying its body in a rhythm that signals an attack. He circles back slightly, turning in short semicircles, watching every movement, searching for the precise opening. No amount of strength matters here, only reflexes, memory, and a stamina that borders on the improbable. The snake strikes its first blow, swift, invisible in its speed. The badger narrowly avoids it, responding with a fleeting bite that barely grazes the scales. The second attack is inevitable. The cobra strikes. Its fangs sink into the badger's cheek, and the dark venom seeps under the skin with the precision of a blade. He staggers backward, his breathing ragged, his legs suddenly giving way as if the ground had shifted. The cobra retreats a few inches, awaiting the final collapse. The badger falls sideways, the earth cushioning its fall. For a moment, its body seems to give out completely. The poison, which would kill almost any other creature in minutes, brings it to the very brink of unconsciousness. The cobra advances to ensure the end, but makes a silent mistake. It gets too close to the one who has not yet finished falling. The badger, in a final reflex, bites with brutal precision, trapping the snake's neck and unleashing all its remaining strength. Then it collapses again, motionless. The cobra lies motionless, its body rigid under the slowly fading light. The landscape regains its stillness as if both had been trapped in a moment suspended between life and death. Minutes pass. The badger's body breathes barely, almost imperceptibly. Then a shudder shakes its muscles, followed by another. She opens one eye, barely a sliver of shadow between two heavy eyelids. Her chest expands with a deep, painful gasp. He struggles to his feet, still unsteady, the effects of the venom having failed to bring him down. He stares at the snake's motionless body, then at the horizon, as if the light of day's end were enough to compel him to carry on. No victory is celebrated here, only survival. With slow but determined steps, the badger begins its return. Each stride is a reminder of the cost of its endurance. The poison still burns beneath its skin, the wounds throb with their own pulse, and fatigue weighs like an added burden on its compact body. The air cools as it moves forward and the savannah darkens, turning every shape into a blurring outline. Even so, he keeps walking, guided by an instinct that understands neither truces nor rewards. He finds the entrance to the burrow where his journey began. He ventures into the gloom, leaving behind the last light of day. The narrow earthen tunnel envelops him, offering a rough but sufficient refuge. There, the damp scent from inside heralds rest. The badger slowly lowers himself, resting his head on the cold ground. There is no peace in his breathing, but there is determination. It is the end of a day that demanded everything from him, and yet, even so, failed to defeat him. In the darkness of his burrow, he closes his eyes with a heavy, almost defeated gesture. But it is not surrender. It is preparation. Because in this place, where each dawn holds a new risk hidden beneath the earth, he only rests when absolutely necessary. Tomorrow, another test awaits him, and when it arrives, he'll be ready. In nature, the word prey is often synonymous with fragility. For generations, that term has relegated it to a secondary role, as if its fate were written before it even began to move. But a closer look reveals that life doesn't follow simple scripts. In every corner of the world, from the heights of a mountain to the darkness of a burrow, many species have found in intelligence the oldest and most precise tool for survival. The mountain goat doesn't dominate its territory through size or strength, but through an almost instinctive understanding of the terrain. It reads the angles of every rock, memorizes invisible routes, anticipates landslides and traps to survive where others fail. Her life doesn't depend on how fast she runs, but on the clarity with which she decides. That clarity is what separates her from the abyss when a predator rushes in without strategy or control. In the woods, the red fox moves with the stealth of an early shadow. Its hearing distinguishes what sight misses. Its memory reconstructs every trail with precision, and its intuition allows it to predict when to advance and when to vanish into the undergrowth. It doesn't need to impose itself to survive. It only needs to understand. And hidden within that understanding is a form of intelligence that doesn't seek recognition, only continuity. But not all evolutionary paths lead to the subtlety of calculation. In lands where scarcity is the law and competition a habit, other animals have made different choices. The honey badger, far from abandoning cunning, combines it with a ferocity that defies all proportion. Its understanding of danger doesn't repel it, it sustains it. Its strength doesn't replace intelligence, but rather reinforces it, creating a creature capable of facing threats twice its size. For him, doubt would be an impossible luxury in a world where every second defines the boundary between dying or continuing. All these life forms reveal the same principle. Survival never depends on a single attribute. It is not strength that guarantees the continuity of a species, nor speed, nor even intelligence alone. It is the ability to adapt, to find advantages in what others see as limitations, to transform the environment into a silent ally. Natural selection does not reward the most violent, nor the biggest, nor the fastest. It rewards those who understand. In a world that changes with relentless speed, these creatures teach that resilience is not always a roar. Sometimes it is a calculated step over the edge of a rock, a timely retreat, a glance that catches a detail that others ignore. And they also remind us that sometimes, in order to survive, instinct must raise its voice above reason and make room for strength and courage, as in the case of the badger, who faces the impossible without asking permission from fear. Thus, in the infinite diversity of strategies that sustains life, intelligence appears not as a privilege of the few, but as a language shared by silent and discreet creatures. It is the invisible foundation that sustains their history, the thread that connects them to a future where they will continue to accumulate memory, perfect tactics, and reinvent themselves in the face of every threat. The world will continue to be an unforgiving stage, full of predators, risks, and landscapes that can turn deadly in an instant. But as long as there are beings capable of thinking before jumping, of reading before acting, of intuiting before fleeing, life will always find a way to continue. Because in nature, intelligence is not a privilege. It is a form of courage. And there, in the stillness of a summit, in the thick of the forest, or in the deep darkness of a burrow, that courage will continue to breathe, remembering that even the smallest can triumph in a world ruled by giants.